My husband, the man I thought I loved, tangled up in the most humiliating, painful mess imaginable, and it was all my doing. I mean, literally tangled, as in he and his mistress were quite literally stuck together, needing the fire department to extricate them. Was I wrong for swapping his lube for superglue? Tell me honestly, would you have done the same thing if you found out your husband was cheating on you in our marital bed? Because the sight of those firefighters, red-faced and struggling, with my husband screaming in agony, still brings a twisted smile to my face. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about a woman pushed to her absolute breaking point. A woman who watched her entire world crumble and decided to rebuild it with a rather sticky, indelible statement. So, let's rewind a bit, back to a time when I still believed in happily ever afters and thought my husband, Mark, was the most loyal man on the planet. Mark and I had been together for 10 years, married for 7. We met in college, 2 awkward art history majors who bonded over a mutual love for obscure Renaissance painters and cheap ramen. Our life together was comfortable, predictable, and, for the most part, happy. We had a cozy little house with a big backyard, 2 rescue dogs, and a shared dream of one day opening our own quirky antique shop. Mark was a software engineer, steady and reliable, and I worked part-time as a graphic designer, which gave me the flexibility to pursue my artistic passions. We had our routines, our inside jokes, and a kind of quiet intimacy that I cherished. Or so I thought. The first crack in my perfect facade appeared subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a hairline fracture in a valuable vase. It started with Mark working later and later. At first, I was understanding. He was on a big project, he said, crucial for his promotion. I'd bring him coffee at his desk, leave him encouraging notes, and try to keep dinner warm. But the late nights turned into all-nighters, and the all-nighters occasionally bled into weekends. He started carrying his phone everywhere, even to the bathroom, which was unlike him. Our conversations became superficial, peppered with vague answers and evasive eye contact. He'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, something sweeter, cloying, like cheap vanilla. When I asked him about it, he'd brush it off, blaming a new air freshener in the office or a colleague's overly enthusiastic use of body spray. My gut, however, began to churn with an icy dread. I tried to ignore it, to logic it away. He's just stressed, I told myself. He's just busy. But the signs, once you start looking for them, become undeniable. He started taking more care with his appearance, new haircuts, fancier clothes, even a new cologne that he never wore for me. He was always too tired for our usual Friday night movie dates, but somehow had the energy for mysterious client dinners or team-building events. The final straw, the one that shattered my denial into a million painful pieces, came on a Tuesday evening. I had decided to surprise Mark by bringing him dinner at the office. I cooked his favorite lasagna, packed it in a thermal bag, and drove through rush-hour traffic, a hopeful, loving wife. When I got to his office building, his car wasn't there. I called him and he answered, his voice thick with what he claimed was exhaustion. "Hey babe, what's up?" "Still working, super busy, probably going to be another few hours." I asked where he'd parked, feigning innocence. He mumbled something about a different garage. That's when I knew. The specific sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach confirmed what I had been trying so hard to ignore. I drove home, the lasagna growing cold, my heart growing colder still. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. I just went to bed, feigned sleep when he finally stumbled in hours later, and cried silently into my pillow. The vanilla scent of another woman clinging to his clothes, a cruel reminder of my nightmare. The next few weeks were a blur of fake smiles and internal agony. I became a detective in my own life, sifting through receipts, checking his call logs. He'd conveniently started deleting them, and even following him on a few occasions. The truth, when it finally revealed itself, was even more mundane and heartbreaking than I had imagined. Her name was Brenda, a bubbly blonde from his office, 10 years younger than me, and with a laugh that, from the few times I overheard it, sounded utterly vacuous. I saw them together once, at a coffee shop near his office, her hand playfully touching his arm, his head thrown back in laughter, a genuine, unburdened laugh he hadn't shared with me in months. The pain was excruciating, a physical ache in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly alone. All those years, all those memories, all the dreams we had built together, they were all a lie. The thought of confronting him filled me with a sickening dread. What would I say? How could I articulate the depth of this wound? And what if he denied it, gaslit me, made me feel crazy for suspecting. I couldn't bear the thought of him twisting the knife further. So I plotted. I know it sounds dark, but the anger inside me was a raging inferno, consuming everything in its path. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he had inflicted on me. I wanted him to be exposed, to be humiliated, to suffer consequences that were as public and as sticky as the mess he had made of our marriage. I spent days brainstorming, discarding ideas that were too violent, too illegal, or just not impactful enough. I considered plastering cheater signs on his car, emailing his entire office, or even keying his new fancy ride. But none of them felt precise enough. None of them truly captured the essence of his betrayal. Then one evening, as I was tidying the bathroom, my eyes landed on a tube of his personal lubricant, a brand new one, still in its packaging, which he'd conveniently left out. A wicked, mischievous idea sparked in my mind, growing brighter and more compelling with each passing second. It was audacious, ridiculous, and utterly perfect. I went to the hardware store the next day, a strange sense of calm settling over me. I bought the strongest industrial-grade super glue I could find, the kind meant for heavy-duty repairs, not for delicate crafts. I also bought a small, empty, clear plastic bottle. Back home, I carefully, meticulously, emptied the contents of the lubricant into a separate container. Then, with a surgical precision that would have made a chemist proud, I filled the original lubricant tube with the super glue. I even added a tiny bit of food coloring, just to match the slightly translucent, milky color of the original product. I sealed it perfectly, wiped it clean, and placed it back exactly where he had left it, amidst his other toiletries. It looked utterly identical. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilarating anticipation. I knew what I was doing was extreme, maybe even cruel, but the thought of his smug face, the way he had so easily lied to me, fueled my resolve. I wanted him to feel trapped, exposed, and utterly, unequivocally stuck. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have gone for revenge, or would you have walked away quietly? Because for me, walking away quietly was simply not an option. The trap was set. The waiting was the hardest part. I spent the next few days in a heightened state of awareness, listening for every car door, every phone call, every rustle in the house. Mark, oblivious to the impending disaster, continued his routine of late nights and flimsy excuses. Then one Friday night, he announced he was working late again. I knew, with an almost psychic certainty, that tonight was the night. I feigned disappointment, wishing him well, and then, as soon as he left, I sprung into action. I had already installed a tiny, discreet camera in our bedroom, cleverly hidden amidst a potted plant, pointing directly at the bed. I know, extreme. But I needed proof, not just for myself, but for what was to come. I wanted to capture his humiliation, not just imagine it. I spent the evening doing normal things, watching TV, reading a book, but my mind was a whirlwind of anticipation. Around 11 p.m., I received a text from Mark. Running a bit late, probably won't be home till after 2 a.m. Don't wait up, babe. The babe felt like a knife twisting in the wound. I knew he was with Brenda. I knew they were coming to my house, to my bed. The audacity was astounding, but also precisely what I needed for my plan to unfold perfectly. I waited, my stomach a knot of nerves and grim satisfaction. Around 1 a.m., I heard a car pull up. Not Mark's usual noisy engine, but a quieter, perhaps more discreet vehicle. Then, the front door creaked open, followed by hushed whispers and soft giggles. My blood ran cold, but my resolve hardened. I heard them ascend the stairs, their footsteps heavy with anticipation, or perhaps, in Mark's case, with guilt. I heard the bedroom door open, then close. A moment of silence, and then, the sounds of them getting comfortable. My heart pounded against my ribs. I knew what was coming. I knew where the tube of lubricant was. A few minutes later, the first scream pierced the silence. It was high-pitched, feminine, and utterly panicked. "Mark, what is this?" Brenda's voice. Then Mark's voice, confused, then escalating into a roar of pure agony. "Ah! What the hell? I can't move! Brenda, get off me! Get off me!" More screams, more panicked shouts. I could hear frantic thrashing, the sounds of limbs flailing, followed by a sickening ripping sound, and then more desperate cries. It was chaotic, terrifying, and in a deeply dark part of my soul, utterly satisfying. I heard Brenda yelling, "I'm stuck! We're stuck! Call an ambulance! Call someone!" Mark was bellowing, "No, not an ambulance. Brenda, just try to pull. But of course they couldn't. Superglue, especially industrial strength, is not to be trifled with. They were in a bind, literally. The thrashing continued for what felt like an eternity, punctuated by whimpers, curses, and increasingly desperate pleas. Then I heard the sound that truly confirmed my plan's success. Mark shouting, "My phone!" "Where's my phone?" "Call the fire department!" "Brenda, we need the fire department." The fire department. Oh, the sweet irony. I had to restrain myself from cackling maniacally. Instead, I carefully, quietly crept out of my bedroom, down the stairs, and strategically discovered the commotion from the living room. I feigned shock, horror, and a growing sense of panic as I realized what was happening. I called 911, my voice trembling with practiced concern, explaining that I thought someone was hurt, perhaps a burglar, upstairs. The operator, bless her diligent heart, dispatched both police and fire services. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and closer until they screeched to a halt outside my house. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated my quiet suburban street, drawing curious neighbors to their windows. I watched, a silent observer of my own meticulously crafted drama, as the uniformed figures swarmed my house. 2 police officers entered first, followed by 4 burly firefighters in their heavy gear, carrying what looked like an assortment of cutting tools. I led them upstairs, my face a mask of bewildered terror, pointing to the closed bedroom door. "It's in there! I heard screaming!" I cried, a single perfectly timed tear rolling down my cheek. The firefighters burst into the room. The sight that greeted them was, I imagine, quite a spectacle. Mark and Brenda, tangled in the sheets, partially clothed, faces contorted in pain and abject humiliation, were indeed glued together. Their skin was red and raw in places where they had tried to pull apart. The air was thick with the scent of superglue, sweat, and cheap vanilla perfume. Mark's face, when he saw me standing there with the emergency services, went from agony to pure, unadulterated horror. His eyes, wide with shock, met mine, and in that moment, he knew. He knew I knew, and he knew I was responsible. The firefighters, bless their professional hearts, tried their best to remain stoic, but I saw the subtle glances, the barely suppressed smirks exchanged between them. One of them actually had to turn away, his shoulders shaking with silent laughter. It took them almost an hour to carefully, painfully separate the 2 adulterers. They used solvents, specialized tools, and a surprising amount of baby oil. Mark and Brenda screamed, cried, and pleaded, their dignity utterly shredded. Their skin was red, chafed, and in some spots they had even lost small patches of hair. It was a messy, embarrassing, and truly unforgettable scene. Once they were finally free, albeit sore and mortified, the police questioned them both. Mark tried to spin a story about an accident with a faulty product, but Brenda, in her distress, blurted out the truth about their affair. The police, mostly concerned with the safety aspect and the unusual nature of the injury, decided it was a domestic matter. They took statements and advised us to seek legal counsel. Mark, his face swollen with anger and shame, refused to look at me. Brenda, sobbing uncontrollably, was taken away by a friend she called. The house smelled faintly of chemicals for days. The aftermath was swift and decisive. I filed for divorce the very next day, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abuse. I showed my lawyer the footage from the hidden camera, which, while not capturing the actual glue application, certainly confirmed their presence in our marital bed. Mark, desperate to avoid further public humiliation, agreed to a relatively quick and quiet settlement, giving me the house, a generous portion of his assets, and full custody of the dogs. He moved out within a week, his tail tucked between his legs. Brenda, from what I heard, was eventually fired from his company due to the scandal and the general unprofessionalism of the situation. Her reputation was, shall we say, permanently cemented. As for me, it was a long road to recovery. The betrayal still stings, but the memory of Mark and Brenda stuck together, a living monument to his infidelity, often brings a wry smile to my face. It was a drastic, perhaps even cruel act, but it allowed me to reclaim my power, to turn my pain into a bizarre form of justice. I'm rebuilding my life now, focusing on my art, my dogs, and finding true happiness. The antique shop dream is still alive, but it's my dream now, not ours. And I've learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, when life tries to stick you in a corner, you just have to grab the nearest tube of superglue and make your own escape. So, if you were on my side in this whole sticky mess, give this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe for more stories where betrayal gets a taste of its own medicine, and share your final thoughts on this whole ordeal in the comments section below. I want to hear if you think my revenge was justified or if I went too far. I'll see you all in the next story.